These young heroes didn't just survive their nightmares, they fought back, and the world watched. From Ken Addy Nash's lightning-fast escape to Jerome Stewart's courtroom fury and Eric Downs avenging a horrific death. These were moments warrior kids fought against evil, killing child predators as cameras captured everything. We begin with Ken Addy Nash, the 6-year-old who destroyed a predator's plan. Ken Addy Nash wasn't supposed to be taking out the trash that August morning in 2022. The 6-year-old from Ohio had no idea she was about to become the star of one of the most satisfying predator takedowns ever caught on camera. 33-year-old Derek McPherson had been lurking, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. What he didn't count on was meeting a pint-sized warrior who would utterly humiliate him on a doorbell camera for the entire world to see. The footage is nothing short of spectacular. McPherson approaches Ken Addy like some kind of seasoned predator, probably thinking this would be easy pickings. He grabs her hand and attempts to drag her away, but Ken Addy had other plans. This little girl screamed like her life depended on it, because it did, and pulled away with such force that the entire incident lasted less than 10 seconds. McPherson, the supposed big bad predator, releases her and flees like the coward he is. Ken Addy's response was textbook perfect. She immediately ran back into her home and alerted her father, Ricky Nash, who pursued the suspect in his car while contacting police. The footage doesn't just show an escape, it shows a complete dismantling of a predator's confidence by someone a fraction of his size. Watching McPherson's body language change from predatory confidence to panicked retreat is absolutely delicious. This grown man, probably twice Ken Addy's weight, was completely overpowered by the sheer force of her will to survive.
Chased him like he still had my kid. Definitely didn't want him to be able to go snatch another kid.
The beauty of this takedown lies in its raw authenticity. There's no Hollywood choreography, no dramatic music, just pure, unfiltered resistance that turned a predator's hunting ground into his worst nightmare. Authorities arrested McPherson, charging him with abduction and inappropriate grabbing. Ken Addy's parents, Ricky and Mandy Nash, had taught their 4 daughters exactly how to respond to threats like this, and their preparation paid off in the most dramatic way possible. Callahan Walsh from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children praised Ken Addy's response, noting that over 83% of successful escapes in attempted abductions involve proactive actions like screaming, kicking, or pulling away. While Ken Addy's story shows how preparation and quick thinking can save lives, sometimes multiple children working together create an even more devastating defense against predators. The Skolnick Boys, when teamwork destroys predator plans. The Skolnick family's August 2024 encounter in Dallas proves that when kids work together, predators don't stand a chance. Zachary and Jonathan Skolnick, along with their friends, were simply having a playdate when 2 vehicles approached with sinister intentions. The home security camera captured every satisfying moment of these predators' complete humiliation. A man from a white SUV attempted to lure the boys by claiming there was a football in the back of the car, because apparently that's the best this genius could come up with. These boys weren't buying what he was selling, not even for a second.
Said there's a football player in the back of the car, and then we said, get in the back of the car.
The sheer stupidity of thinking children would fall for such an obvious ploy reveals just how delusional these predators really are. 9-year-old Jonathan and his friends recognized the danger immediately and ran toward the Skolnick home, screaming for help. Zachary was the first to reach the door, shouting, "Someone's trying to kidnap us," words that probably made this predator's blood run cold. The coordination between these boys was flawless. They recognized the threat, communicated effectively, and executed their escape with military precision. The security footage showed the man chasing Jonathan but retreating when Genna Skolnick appeared with her phone to take a photo of the SUV's license plate. Nothing sends a predator running quite like the threat of being identified and caught. This coward went from hunter to hunted in seconds, his entire operation crumbling the moment he realized he'd been caught on camera. What makes this case even more satisfying is that it wasn't an isolated incident. A separate incident in the same area involved a teenage girl hiding behind a neighbor's car to avoid a man following her, also caught on camera. The neighbor, Shane Burke,
She said that somebody that she didn't know had been following her, kind of gawking at her, staring at her, making her feel uncomfortable. She was extremely shook up.
reported the girl's distress to authorities, proving that when communities work together, predators have nowhere to hide. These incidents created a web of surveillance and awareness that turned an entire neighborhood into a predator hunting zone. Callahan Walsh emphasized the importance of teaching children to be wary of strangers in vehicles, as most abductions involve a car. The Skolnick boys had clearly been taught well, turning what could have been a tragedy into a complete victory over evil. Their response was so perfect, so coordinated, that it should be used as training material for other families. Police are still searching for suspects in both cases, but the damage to these predators' confidence has already been done. These boys didn't just escape, they created a playbook for how children can work together to obliterate predator schemes. But sometimes, escape isn't enough, and children find themselves fighting back in ways that change everything. Ruby Franca's Child, the escape that exposed a monster. Ruby Franca's Child didn't just escape on camera, they brought down an entire empire of abuse in August 2023. The visibly malnourished preteen approached a neighbor's house in Evans, Utah, with duct tape around their ankles and wrists, creating footage that would destroy the carefully crafted image of a YouTube family vlogger and expose the monster hiding behind the camera. This wasn't just an escape, it was the beginning of justice for children who had been tortured under the guise of discipline. This wasn't your typical predator scenario, this was something far more sinister. The child had escaped from the home of Franca's business partner, Jody Hildebrandt, where systematic abuse had been disguised as discipline. Home surveillance footage captured the child ringing the doorbell and asking to be taken to a police station, words that would send shockwaves through millions of former followers who had unknowingly supported this abuse. The neighbors' immediate response was perfect. They called police, reporting an emaciated child who was hungry and thirsty. When officers arrived, they discovered the true scope of the horror. Police found another of Franca's children, a 10-year-old girl, in a dark closet in Hildebrandt's home, also malnourished. The rescue operation revealed a house of horrors that had been operating under the cover of family content creation. Body camera footage showed police confronting Hildebrandt, who initially refused to cooperate, and discovering evidence of abuse, including ropes and handcuffs in a basement panic room. The child's escape had exposed what could only be described as a torture chamber masquerading as a family home. The irony is stunning. Franca had built her brand on family values while systematically destroying her own children. The aftermath was swift and brutal for the abusers. Franca and Hildebrandt were arrested and later pleaded guilty to 4 counts of second-degree aggravated child abuse, each receiving 4 to 60 years in prison. Franca's journal entries, later released, revealed extreme abuse justified by religious extremism, including starving the children and forcing them to sleep on hard floors. These weren't momentary lapses in judgment, this was systematic torture documented in writing. This child's escape didn't just save their own life, it saved their siblings and destroyed 2 predators who had been operating under the guise of family values. The courage it took to walk to that door, despite being terrorized for months, represents one of the most powerful acts of resistance ever captured on camera. This child understood that freedom meant risk, but staying meant death, and they chose to fight. But when words aren't enough, some young heroes take matters into their own hands. The 11-year-old Florida fighter, when resistance becomes weapon. Florida's 11-year-old warrior didn't just fight back against her would-be kidnapper, she turned his attack into his worst nightmare, all captured on video for the world to witness. The assailant approached her, thinking he'd found an easy target, but instead found himself face-to-face with a tiny hurricane of resistance that would leave him running and eventually behind bars. This girl's response was so fierce, so immediate, that it completely shattered her attacker's expectations and confidence. The video evidence is absolutely devastating to anyone who thinks children are helpless victims. This girl didn't hesitate, didn't freeze, didn't comply. She physically resisted with everything she had. Her proactive resistance was key to her escape, aligning with patterns noted by child safety experts who consistently emphasize that fighting back dramatically increases escape chances. The footage shows a masterclass in why predators consistently underestimate their intended victims. This girl's resistance was so effective, so immediate, and so fierce that her attacker's entire plan crumbled within seconds. The psychological impact on her attacker must have been devastating. Suddenly, the hunter became the hunted. A Florida man was arrested in connection with the incident, which means this predator's moment of thinking he had control quickly turned into what will likely be years of having absolutely no control behind bars. The irony is delicious. He thought he was the hunter, but ended up becoming the hunted. His victim became his destroyer, and the cameras captured every moment of his failure. Video evidence was critical in identifying the suspect, highlighting the value of surveillance in public or residential areas. This footage didn't just document an escape, it provided law enforcement with everything they needed to ensure this predator couldn't hunt again. The girl's resistance created both her freedom and his capture, a perfect example of how fighting back pays dividends beyond immediate survival. No elaborate plans, no weapons, no backup, just one brave girl who refused to become a statistic. This Florida fighter proved that size doesn't determine strength, and age doesn't determine courage. Her victory represents every parent's hope and every predator's nightmare nightmare, a child who refuses to go quietly. But sometimes, the most powerful resistance happens not in the moment of attack, but in the pursuit of justice that follows. Jerome Stewart, the courtroom warrior who made justice personal. Jerome Stewart wasn't about to let his mother's killer sit comfortably in court, and when the 23-year-old launched his attack on July 11, 2019, cameras captured every moment of raw justice in action. Jerome and his brother Anthony Dees, 30, attacked Dale Williams Sr., the 62-year-old man convicted of murdering their mother, Elizabeth Pledger Stewart, during his sentencing hearing in Mahoning County, Ohio. This wasn't random violence, this was calculated justice delivered by sons who refused to let their mother's killer sit comfortably. The backstory makes their courtroom fury entirely understandable. Dale Williams Sr. had planned Elizabeth's murder with chilling calculation, waiting 45 minutes for her to drive by on Market Street during morning rush hour, then ramming his van into her car and shooting her multiple times as she tried to flee. Williams had confessed to this brutal execution, but apparently thought he could sit through sentencing without consequences. The methodical nature of the murder, the waiting, the ramming, the shooting, revealed a level of premeditation that made Jerome's response inevitable. He was wrong, dead wrong. Video footage shows Jerome leaping over a table to attack Williams while Anthony grabbed him by the foot, dragging him to the ground. The brothers punched and kicked Williams before deputies intervened, using a taser to subdue one of them. Williams was taken to a hospital for evaluation, probably the first real consequence he'd faced since taking their mother's life. Jerome's words captured on camera reveal the raw emotion driving his actions. "He killed my mama. She took care of me, bro." A statement that cuts straight to the heart of why this attack was inevitable. This wasn't random violence, this was sons ensuring their mother's killer understood that his actions had consequences beyond a prison sentence. The incident occurred just as the family prepared to deliver victim impact statements with extra deputies assigned due to anticipated emotional intensity. The court knew trouble was brewing, but they couldn't have anticipated the explosive nature of Jerome and Anthony's response. The timing was perfect. Just as Williams thought he was about to hear words, he instead felt fists and feet delivering a much more immediate form of impact. Both brothers were arrested and charged with assault, obstructing official business, and contempt of court, with each given a $4,000 bond. Neither had a prior criminal record, making their actions even more powerful. These weren't career criminals, but grieving sons who decided justice needed a personal touch. The legal system failed to account for the human element of loss, and Jerome filled that gap with his fists. The family's response to Elizabeth's murder reveals the depth of their loss. A GoFundMe campaign initiated by their sister Christy Johnson highlighted the family's devastation, stating, "Our mom was our best friend. We are left to feel like we have nothing for the rest of our lives." Jerome's attack wasn't just about revenge, it was about ensuring that Williams understood the human cost of his actions, something the legal system seemed incapable of conveying. The cameras captured not just violence, but justice in its most raw and honest form. But Jerome wasn't the only son to decide that courtroom decorum mattered less than making his mother's killer pay, as another grieving young man would soon follow his example. London Thomas, the son who couldn't let his mother's killer breathe easy. London Thomas had one goal on June 3, 2019, when he sat in that Muskegon County courtroom, make sure Vashon Flowers understood that murdering his mother would have consequences beyond a prison sentence. The preliminary hearing for Flowers, who was charged with the open murder of Jamie Thomas Flowers, became an explosion of grief and fury when London launched himself across the courtroom in an attack that cameras captured in devastating detail. This wasn't just an outburst, it was a son's declaration that his mother's life had value. The circumstances surrounding Jamie Thomas Flowers' death were brutal enough to drive any son to violence. Vashon Flowers was accused of breaking into Jamie's home by kicking down a door and shooting her 4 times at point-blank range, an execution-style murder that destroyed a family and left London burning with righteous anger. The cold, calculated nature of the killing, breaking down doors, multiple shots, point-blank range, revealed a level of brutality that made London's response inevitable. Courtroom footage shows London leaping from his seat in the public gallery, running across the courtroom and jumping over a barrier to reach Flowers, who was seated in the jury box consulting with his public defender. The attack was as spontaneous as it was inevitable, a grieving son finally getting within striking distance of the man who had destroyed his world. London's movement across the courtroom was fluid, determined, and absolutely terrifying for Flowers. 4 court officers quickly tackled and handcuffed London before he could make significant physical contact with Flowers, but the psychological damage was already done. Flowers had to sit there knowing that his his victim's son was willing to risk everything to get his hands on him, a reminder that his actions had consequences beyond whatever sentence the court might impose. The fear in Flowers' eyes was probably the first real justice Jamie Thomas Flowers had received. The aftermath was swift but telling. London was arrested by courtroom officers, and the next day he appeared in court, where he was held in contempt and banned from attending further hearings until the trial concluded. The system was more interested in maintaining order than acknowledging that London's actions came from a place of profound loss and justified anger. They punished the grieving son while protecting the alleged murderer, a perfect example of how the legal system often fails victims' families. Some sources noted that Flowers had reportedly confessed to the killing, which likely fueled London's emotional response, though legally Flowers remained innocent until proven guilty. For London, however, the confession was probably all the proof he needed to justify his attack. London Thomas's courtroom assault wasn't just about personal revenge, it was about ensuring that his mother's killer understood the human cost of his actions. But sometimes the pursuit of justice requires more than a single son's rage. Eric Downs, when a serial killer met his match in court. Eric Downs had been waiting for this moment since his mother Rosemary was found dead, and when he finally got within striking distance of serial killer Alfred Gaynor on April 30th, 1998, cameras captured an explosion of justice that would become legendary among courtroom attacks. During Gaynor's pre-trial hearing in Springfield, Massachusetts, Eric launched himself at the man who had raped and murdered his mother, punching him in the head and attempting to throw him over a railing in an assault that was as satisfying as it was inevitable. This wasn't just personal revenge. This was a son taking on a monster. Alfred Gaynor wasn't just any killer. He was a monster who had terrorized Springfield's women for years. The former handyman had raped and murdered at least 9 women between 1995 and 1998, making him one of Massachusetts' most prolific serial killers. Rosemary Downs, 43, was found naked and dead in her apartment, one of many victims of Gaynor's systematic campaign of terror against vulnerable women. The methodical nature of Gaynor's crimes, the stalking, the rape, the murder, made Eric's attack a moment of pure justice. Eric was seated in the gallery when Gaynor stood before the judge, but overcome with grief and rage, he rushed toward his mother's killer. The attack was visceral and immediate, a son's fury unleashed on the predator who had destroyed his family. Court officers and others, including Gaynor's sister Kathy and Robert Hill, intervened to restrain Eric and separate the two, but the damage to Gaynor's composure was already done. For once, this predator faced consequences that couldn't be manipulated or avoided. His crimes involved rape and strangulation, terrorizing the community and leaving families like Eric's shattered in his wake. For Eric to get his hands on this monster, even briefly, represented a moment of justice that the legal system couldn't provide. This was personal accountability delivered directly. Eric Downs, Robert Hill, and Kathy Gaynor were charged with assault and disorderly conduct following the incident, but were released on bail and allowed to attend future hearings. The system was more concerned with maintaining order than acknowledging that Eric's actions came from a place of profound loss and justified outrage. They charged the victims' families while protecting the serial killer. The attack gained significant attention, with video footage circulating on platforms like YouTube and social media, often framed as an understandable act of retribution by a grieving son. Despite his high victim count, Gaynor did not receive the same level of media attention as other serial killers, possibly due to the socio-economic and racial dynamics of his victims. Eric's attack forced attention on these forgotten victims. Gaynor was later convicted in 2000 of 4 counts of murder and aggravated rape, receiving 4 life sentences without parole. In 2009, he admitted to 5 additional murders as part of a plea deal, proving that Eric's instincts about this monster were absolutely correct. Every punch Eric landed was justified by crimes that the full scope of which wasn't even known at the time. Eric Downs' attack on Alfred Gaynor wasn't just personal revenge, it was a son ensuring that his mother's killer understood the human cost of his predatory actions, captured forever on camera as a testament to a family's refusal to let evil go unpunished. The Glendale survivor, when quick thinking defeats predatory plans. The young girl in Glendale, Arizona, proved that sometimes the most devastating weapon against predators isn't violence, it's intelligence, awareness, and the refusal to become a victim, all captured on security cameras that would preserve her victory forever. Her escape from an alleged kidnapping attempt was recorded by surveillance cameras, showing how quick thinking and decisive action can utterly destroy a predator's carefully laid plans. This girl's response was so perfect, so immediate, that it turned what should have been her worst day into her greatest triumph. While specific details about her her age and the exact circumstances remain limited in available sources. What's clear is that this girl recognized danger immediately and responded with the kind of decisive action that turns potential victims into victorious survivors. Her escape was attributed to quick thinking and awareness, proving that preparation and street smarts can be more powerful than any weapon when facing predators. The footage shows a masterclass in situational awareness and immediate response. The security camera footage serves as more than just evidence. It's a masterclass in how children can recognize threats and respond effectively. This girl didn't freeze, didn't comply, didn't hope for the best. She took immediate action that sent her would-be attacker scrambling. The incident prompted discussions about child safety, with experts offering tips on how to prepare children for such situations. Her response became a teaching moment for countless other families. Next up, we see a much more horrifying case of kids who escaped after suffering in the hands of predators they once believed wanted the best for them. Jordan Turpin, the 911 call that exposed hell. On January 14, 2018, 17-year-old Jordan Turpin made a decision that would shatter one of America's most horrific child abuse cases wide open. After planning their escape for over 2 years, Jordan and her 13-year-old sister climbed through a window of their Perris, California home. When her younger sister lost courage and returned, Jordan pressed forward alone, clutching a deactivated cell phone like a lifeline. Jordan called 911, reporting that her parents were abusive, her siblings were chained to beds, and the house was so filthy she could barely breathe. She provided photos of the conditions to the responding officer, images so disturbing they prompted immediate action. This wasn't just a domestic dispute call. This was the key that unlocked a torture chamber masquerading as a family home. What deputies discovered inside the Turpin house defied human comprehension. 12 children, some shackled, all malnourished and dirty, living in squalid conditions with the stench of feces, garbage, and mold overwhelming. The children were so emaciated that deputies initially believed all were minors, though they ranged from 2 to 29 years old. For years, David and Louise Turpin had tortured their 13 children through starvation, chaining them to beds for weeks, allowing only 1 shower per year, and keeping them isolated from the outside world. The eldest daughter weighed just 82 pounds at age 29. Some children were so sheltered they didn't understand basic concepts like medication or police. The parents presented an outward image of a large, happy family on social media, sharing photos of trips to Disneyland, a sick charade that masked decades of systematic torture. David worked as a computer engineer for major defense contractors, while Louise played the devoted homemaker, but behind closed doors, they were orchestrating a house of horrors that would make Stephen King weep. Jordan's courage didn't just save her siblings, it exposed the dark reality that child predators often hide in plain sight, wearing the masks of loving parents while inflicting unimaginable cruelty on the most vulnerable. Speaking of predators hiding behind false facades, our next case takes us to New Jersey, where another young woman's desperate escape would reveal years of captivity and abuse. The 18-year-old who escaped New Jersey's House of Horrors. On May 8, 2025, an 18-year-old woman burst from a Gloucester Township home, running hysterically to her neighbor's house after 7 years of captivity and sexual abuse. Her mother, Brenda Spencer, and stepfather, Brandon Mosley, had turned their home into a prison where childhood innocence went to die. The victim's escape began when she was removed from school in 2018 under the guise of homeschooling, a common predator tactic that exploits educational loopholes. What followed was a nightmare that makes horror movies look like Disney films. She was forced to live in a dog crate for approximately 1 year, then chained in a padlocked bathroom, and later confined to a bare room with only a bucket for a toilet. The abuse escalated beyond physical torture. Brandon Mosley sexually abused the victim, withholding food until assaults were completed, a twisted game of survival that no child should endure. She was beaten with belts, had her head shaved as punishment, and bore visible scars on her wrists from being chained. When she finally escaped, the neighbor Susan and her son immediately took her to a hospital where she was treated for 2 days. The home investigation revealed squalid conditions, with numerous animals living alongside the victims, a sick menagerie of neglect. Mosley, ironically employed as a SEPTA conductor who had been recently honored by the company, was placed on administrative leave following his arrest. Sometimes the monsters hiding in plain sight wear uniforms and receive employee recognition awards. The cameras don't lie, and neither do these results. When kids fight back, predators lose every single time. These 10 stories represent more than individual victories. They're a blueprint for how properly prepared children can turn the tables on those who would harm them, ensuring that predators become the hunted and children become the heroes of their own stories. That'll be all for now, folks. Thanks for watching. For more of such content, do click on the card showing on the screen.